If you're after a beginner-friendly build order to get you through the archaic age in a solid time, in as few steps as possible, then that's what we're going to cover today for every pantheon in Age of Mythology Retold. These won't be the meta builds, but it will get you up and running and be able to start a game with every god on any land map. And stick around to the end of the video as I'll be sharing a small gift that will help you with your build orders. Let's start off with the Greeks. So first up, we're going for the Greeks. I feel like the Greeks are the perfect civilization to learn Age of Mythology, as they are one of the most basic, and they probably have the most carryover from any other RTS game. So what we want to do first is we want to send the first 4 villagers over to your local hunt source. In my case, it is the Elks, and we want to build a granary right in the middle so that they all kind of spread around it. Then the next 2 villages, we want to move over to the gold mine, and we want to build a storehouse on the long side of the gold mine. Then our scout, we're just going to send on a couple of rings around, and then we can just leave him, kind of forget about him. If you want to pay attention, that's absolutely great, but we don't really need to. We can just let him do his own thing. So once we've got our 4 here, our 2 here, we're then going to move 2 over to the wood line. And this is when, if you don't have auto queue set up in your settings, it's a great idea to hit auto queue now. Otherwise, you'll run out of villagers and you'll stop building them, and that's never fun. But auto queue is such a great feature for the villagers, so you definitely want it on. So our second guy is going to come over to the wood line. He's not going to go on the specific tree I want, but not a problem. Now we want to move 2 more over to the food before we need to do something else. What I like to do is just shoot one of the elks that's next to the granary with the town center, just because it saves a bit of time, but it's absolutely not necessary. Whenever we find some cows, we want to go to the town center and hit this livestock button, which just means that whichever livestock we found will go over to the town center. When we see this yellow thing here, it means that we're running out of population space. So what we want to do is we want to chop a house with our gold mine villager and then just shift click to bring him back to the gold mine. And after that, we want 3 more villagers to come over to the food. So we'll be hitting the magic number of 9, and that is when we need to do something new. So we're looking for 1 more villager here. You can shoot in hunt, kind of like this. It will go in the opposite direction to where you're facing, and then if it's aggressive hunt, it will be running towards you instead. We're just going to run our guy around. Then once this guy comes out, we're going to drop a temple down. So we want to drop in whatever gold we have with one of the gold miners and then build a temple afterwards. And then this guy is then going to sit on the temple straight after that. Now our remaining villagers, we want to move them over to the wood line. So we're getting 3 more to go over to wood. And then we want to hit that advance button. So that means that when we get to 5 wood, that's when we should advance. And then our scout can just do whatever he wants. So that means we're going to do 1 more. So here you can either turn off auto queue, or we could just wait for the 400 food. So we're going to get the 400 food here with a bit of a force drop and then wait for the temple to finish. Now we're going to go through Athena just for the sake of this, but obviously we can do whatever we want. Now, when you're advancing to the next stage, there's a few things to do. We want to get 4 on gold, and we want to get 6 on the wood. So that means that 3 come off of food to go to gold, 1 comes off to go to wood. This guy wants to build us a house, the favor praying guy, and we want to get out our classical or archaic age Greek hero. So I'm playing Hades, so we get Ajax, and we want to do this to pick up any relics, scout about, or put on any pressure to our opponent. The Greek heroes are extremely strong, so you definitely want to get them out. This guy we also just want to keep praying because favor is good in Age of Mythology Retold, and we absolutely want to leave a guy on there. The relics go in the temple. You can look around for whatever one you want. If there's a specific good one, this one is whatever, but just for the sake of it, we're going to pick it up. Now, we should hit the next stage very, very soon, and that's when we want to drop down a couple of buildings. So we want to drop down a military academy with this guy, an archery range with this guy, and we want to get out our Achilles because he is very strong also. These guys will also finish up on our food here, and then we want to shift click to build them a granary on the chicken local food source again. Then we're going to have... She doesn't want to work. Then we're going to have 2 buildings to produce units out of. So we're going to get a couple of hoplites here We're going to get a couple of archers here and build another house with our praying man. And this is the basic setup for the Greeks. If you want to get more myth units out, we could also put more on favor now, straight from the town center. Next up is the Egyptians, and similar to the Greeks, this is one which can be used for all of the Egyptian civs. For the sake of this, I'm going with Set because it matters when you build Set's house. So just showing that it can be used with any of them. But this build will absolutely work for all of them. And this is what we're going for. So we're going, the first 3 villagers move over to the food source, and then the next 2 are going to move over to the gold mine. And we want our pharaoh to be empowering the granary, because that's where most of our villagers will be. And it also means we need less on food overall. So these 2 will move over. We want to build a mining camp on the long side, very similar to the Greeks. And then our next villager that comes out the town center, we want to move over to food. And we can shoot this giraffe if we really want to. Then our next villager is going to come out and build a monument and then a house. Build a monument, shift-click house, shift-click to gold, and then that's her sorted. And that means that we are going to get our house at the right time. Because I'm playing Set, I want to convert an animal, and this guy wants to just scout around. But if you are Isis, you want to be scouting around with the priest. And if you are Ra, then you want to be scouting around with the pharaoh. Or you want to be scouting around with the priest and doing some monument shenanigans here. But what we're doing is we're sending the rest over to food until we have the magic number for the Egyptians is 8. We don't need 9 because we have a pharaoh, and that means that we get more food income. Just going to shoot these. I just like to shoot them when they're close to the granary, just so then we have less walking time, but it's not something we absolutely need to do. As you can see, we get our house up. Even if we would have found this sooner, we'd be absolutely fine. So we want one more to come over to the food, and then that's when we need to do something else. Same as the last one, we can press our livestock button and it brings in any. So we found a run goat over here, which is great. And we won't need to move any of our food villagers yet. And that is the 9th. So that means that she is going to come and build us a temple. And one great thing about the Egyptians is she can then build us as many houses as we want for free. So rather than getting pop blocked, we can just send her to build as many houses as we feel like. Now, because this is a general build, I want to get some wood. Wood income is not necessary for Egyptians unless you want to get some kind of upgrades or get slingers. But for the sake of this, we're going for a well-rounded eco into a classical fight. So we want to get some wood for slingers. Then our last 2 are going to come over to the gold mine. Over here. And then we're going to hit that advance button. And then we're going to have a little bit of a shifter around of our economy. So when she finishes up here, that's when we can press our button. Just there. So then we're going to go through whichever one we feel like. For the sake of this, let's go through Anubis. Then what we'll do is we'll get 2 to come over here. And then we're going to get our pharaoh here, and we're going to get the pickaxe upgrade, because gold is very crucial for Egyptians. So that is what we're going to go for. And she's going to go around doing all of these. And we also want to get an extra monument down. So we're going to get a monument with one of these. We can either leave the pharaoh here, or we can do something cute and drop this off and then do a bit of a empower. But if you just want to leave him be, I'd leave him on the gold mine. It's going to be the better place to go. Then just as for the rest of the civs, we want to bring these guys over here and drop a granary on the chickens. We do chickens rather than berries because they gather slightly faster. But if we are Set, we also could have brought our rhinoceros back and eaten that too. So we've got our extra bits down. We've got our eco upgrades. So as soon as we get to the next stage with our gold villagers, we're going to want to drop down 2 barracks. And then with these 2 barracks, we're going to want to build a slingers out of one, and then spearmen or axemen out of the other. And then we've got enough favor to get some upgrades like this one, or whichever one we want, or get some myth units out. And that would be the basic setup for the classical age for Egyptians. Okay, here we are. We're going in with the Atlantean Civ. So our first two villages, we want to move over to the food. And then each of the oracles, we want to put them in a control group. That's what I like to do, and send them left, forward, and right. This is basically so that we get as much coverage as possible. And then we want to hit our auto queue and send the next one over to gold. You don't have to do the control groups. It's just something that I like to do because then you can spam on them and see what they are. So we're going 2 food, 1 gold. Then our next one will come over to wood. There's a lot less citizens to worry about with this civ, so it's a good beginner civ. And also you don't need any drop-off points. So it's a lot easier than any of the other civs because you have half the economy basically. And you don't have to worry about where you're putting your granaries and your storehouses. Now, something that I did forget to mention is you can either wait for this noise and then you can drop a house, or you can just drop a house straight away. It's up to you, really. But that noise is there to just let you know that that one needs to build a house. We're doing all of our building, the house and the temple with our gold mine villager. Then we want to move over to the food. When they start to wave their 6 around, that is when you want to move the guys on. So it's just a good idea to just leave enough room so that you can get your big circle down, and they have so much line of sight. It's actually crazy now. We're just gonna shoot some more of these guys. So we want to get another one on food here. So we're doing 2 food, so we're going to total of 4. And then our next villager we want to move over to the wood line. We're only going to need 1 on gold for the whole of the archaic age. It's very similar to the Greeks where they had 2, but obviously she is basically worth 2 of a Greek villager, so that's absolutely fine. Eventually, I'm just going to move these guys, and we're just going to leave them alone, and they're going to collect the favor for us. Obviously, if you're in a normal game, you want to scout as much as physically possible, but I feel like I'm concentrating too much on them. So we've got the wood here. Then what we're going to do is send the next one over to food, and as soon as we get the 150 wood, we want to drop down the temple with the gold mine villager. So we can do that either before this villager or after it. Either is absolutely fine. Then what we want to do after this one is send 1 villager to gold, 1 villager to food. Oh, sorry. 1 to gold, 1 to wood, and advance. We can also just send 1 to gold, cut villages, and advance to get a slightly quicker time. But what I like to do, or at least for a beginner video, is get more of an economic setup available, because it's just when you advance too quick, you miss out on some of your eco, and it can be pretty tricky if you don't put enough damage on the opponent. So what we're doing here is we're getting 1 more villager over to the wood, and then we will hit that advance button. You should get it slightly quicker than me, but my guys were idle because I forgot to set them up. So we're going to go through Oceanus. So as soon as we get the 400 food, we want to move 1 over to the wood. So we want a 442 setup, and this guy can also build us an economic guild. Now, there are 2 things that we want to do. One is the economic guild, the other one is we want to queue an oracle. So we can queue 1 oracle, we can queue 2 oracles. Just depends on how much favor income you realistically want. And then what we're going to do when we get up to the next stage is we're going to drop a counter barracks and a barracks. So that means that we're going to have to set up for Mamillo and Terma, or Mamillo and some Caraballister. And that'll be a nice setup. Or you can just do double counter barracks and leave the Mamillo out. Or you can just go for the Mamillo. But if you do that, if you only go for food-based units, then as soon as you hit the next stage, I would take probably these 2 guys off and then move them over to food, just so you have enough to sustain the double food production. So these guys, what we're going to do is we're going to move them over to the chickens for the new ones, because we want to go for some food units. So we're going with here. We're going to get a barracks. We're going to get a... Oops, I didn't mean that. We want to get a counter barracks. I almost deleted her. And then, yeah, and then he's going to be over there. We're going to put those in a control group each. And then we're going to get our units out. And then this is a nice stable setup for the next stage. And then one thing that I almost forgot is we want to drop a house as we're advancing too. But it is fine to do it as soon as you hear the noise. You have more than enough time to get one down. And that is the Atlantean Civ. Probably the one that I would recommend for beginners. Okay, here we go. The next one up is the Norse. And our first 3 villagers want to move over to the food. Our Ulfsark wants to build us a house. And we actually want a dwarf out first rather than the gatherers. The reason for this is that dwarfs are way better at mining gold. So we don't want to worry about villagers going over there and moving them off later. We just want to get a dwarf on there ASAP. So it does mean that we can't auto queue the villagers on there, but it's something that we're gonna have to deal with. So what we're doing here is we're getting 3 food, 1 dwarf gold, and then the next 2 are coming over to the wood line. Now we can auto queue gatherers now, and we can actually put in a dwarf whenever we can. So actually we're going to get a dwarf here now. So what we're basically doing is for the first 3 dwarfs, whenever we have 60 gold, we're just going to get ourselves a dwarf, and then the auto queue villagers start afterwards. So it's actually nice and easy, much easier than it was in the legacy game. So we're just going to scout around with our guy. He's already put the house down, so we don't have to worry about that. So then we get the dwarf here. Then we're going to get 2 more gatherers over on the food, and then we're going to get another dwarf again. Basically, as soon as we get the 60 gold, which should be very soon, we are going to go for it. So you can either do that by auto queuing him now, or what I like to do, because I only want 1 and I don't want to accidentally leave the auto queue on, is I just queue up the 1, but that's absolutely personal preference. Then what we're doing here now is we're getting up to 9 villagers for the food, and we're not going to get any more dwarfs out until after the temple's down, because we want to get a temple down in a decent time, and it costs a lot of gold, and dwarfs are quite an investment. So what I would like to say is when the 3rd dwarf is out, that's when we're going to think about bringing our Ulfsark back, because we want to build a temple at home. We can build a forward temple if we really want to, but most of the time we want it back at home. So that gives him or her enough time to come back to build the temple. So we're getting up to that 9 number. So this build is for all the Norse except Thor, and it's because Thor starts with dwarf, so you just have to completely change the build up. But it works with Freyr, which I'm playing now, Odin, and Loki. Then we've got all of our guys out here. We're going to drop. So we've got our 9, which is enough to get the advance time. Then our next one will go over to the wood. We're making sure that we get the temple down, and then we want to get 1 last dwarf out. So we can be spamming that if we really want to. But once this temple's down, we're going to hit that advance button, and we should be pretty good on that. We can even leave our auto queue on. No, we won't. We'll actually have to cancel that one. And then just because we are the new guy, we're going to go through Ula. Then we're going to make sure that our auto queue is back on. Then once we've hit that advance button, we want to shift our villagers around slightly, especially the dwarf. Oh, what is going on here? Where is that dwarf? Especially the dwarf. And then we also want to move them like this. So we want 7, 5, 4, and we want to get a couple of Hersa out. So Hersa want to go around and build. And what I like to do is just drop a couple of houses down, then you don't have to worry about anything. And then we also want to get at least 1 or maybe 2 dwarfs out to basically we want to slowly get our dwarfs out rather than just auto queuing them and then having way too much gold. We want to slowly get them. And it's just so much easier now because you can hit a dwarf and then your auto queue villagers is still on. So we could say that this guy would actually go and get a relic, but I was a bit late on him. So then what we do when we hit this part, we then drop down whatever buildings we're going for. So I'm going to go for a barracks or a longhouse and a great hall. So then we can go something like throwing axemen, raiding cavalry, or whatever we want with some hearses. And then we have all 4 buildings here, and then we're just going to occasionally again get ourselves dwarfs, and that is the basic setup for the Norse. And then maybe we can drop our bastion down as well in a nice spot. Maybe not that, that's a terrible spot. And lastly, we have Thor. Thor is probably the hardest build, which is why I've left him till last, but Thor's a really fun god to play, so I definitely recommend trying him out. So the reason that this build is only for Thor is because he starts with dwarves, and he also has a special tech where when you get an armory upgrade, you get a free dwarf. So what we're doing here is we're sending the dwarves over to one tree. They will fully chop down that tree, and then they will go over to a dwarven gold mine. The Ulfsark needs to build an armory, then a house, then scout, and then your starting ox cart will move over to the food villages. It's quite a lot to do right at the start, but then you get to sit back and watch everything happen, basically. So what you can do right at the start is you can drop down your dwarven mine anytime from when this tree is full to when it empties off, and then just shift-click the villagers onto it. And then with the dwarven armory, as soon as it's built, you want to get the pierce armor upgrade, because you have spare food and wood. And then you can actually put a waypoint down from the armory to a random straggler tree, and that's where we're going to send the dwarves. You can also do a build without the dwarven armory, but I feel like if you're going to play Thor, you should just play him how is going to be the most optimal. And also, I feel like this is easier than any janky build that you could really come up with. But what we're doing with the food villages is we're basically sending everything to food. We want to send all the gatherers to food until we get to 12. But what I've done for the guide is I've split it so that we know exactly when we need to do different things. I also like to shoot the hunt with the town center just because it makes it slightly more efficient. It's not something you really need to do, but it's just something to bear in mind. Also, the dwarves that are on the wood, you can also put them close to some of the ox carts if you have that luxury. Like I probably could have done it in this one, but I just wanted to show that it isn't a big deal. You can just have the dwarf running back and forth to the town center. Now, the reason we're not building an ox cart is otherwise we won't have enough time to build the temple. And we want to make sure we get the temple up to get a decent advance time. Getting a decent time to age up is quite important, so that's what we do. When we get to 8 villagers on food, that is the time that we want to get the next armory upgrade, which is copper mail. And again, we want to send that dwarf that comes out to a random straggler tree, just like the first one. And when we're about 9 villagers for food, that's when we want to run back and put the temple down. Actually, it was literally just as we turn into 10 villagers. That's when you want to run your Ulfsark back to build the temple up, just to make sure, again, we get a good advance time. Then we're going to send another villager over to the food, and it might seem a bit excessive that we've got 11, but it's because we didn't start with our normal 3 to go over to food. We started with 0, so it just means you need quite a lot over there to get the advance time. But it does make the build slightly easier as long as you have the APM to do the very start. Now, once the temple is down, we are going to send the final villager over to the wood. Then we will need to cancel the auto queue for the villagers and force drop all of the food villagers in. This just makes sure that we get the advance time. We can obviously choose whichever god we want, and then it's all about splitting the villagers up. So what makes this build slightly harder as well is we don't have enough resources to drop down ox carts, so we just want to drop them down as soon as we get them. It's more important for the wood villagers because they have much further to walk. You can just let your dwarves finish off on the dwarven mine, and then once you have enough food and wood for those, you want to drop an ox cart next to a normal gold mine because they will run out before you get to the classical age. Then one more thing to worry about is you want to get hearses out because they're going to help build. And then when you get 45 wood, you want to drop down a house. Because as soon as you advance to the next stage, you're going to get your Herser out, you're going to get your free myth unit, and then you'll be housed and won't be able to build any villages, which is not what we want. It's also nice to queue up just a couple of Hersers because they're going to help you defend and help you get more military buildings up. Now, we're going to advance now, and this is the only build where we can't drop 2 military buildings down. This is because we have the extra dwarfs out and we spent so much extra resources on all the armory upgrades. So instead of that, we're basically just going to have to sit back, play a little bit defensive for the first minute or so, just in case he wants to come in and do a bit of a aggressive play on us. But when the first military building is finished, we have enough for the second one. So it isn't really that much of a big deal. It just means that we can't rush as much as your opponent can. And that is basically it for the Thor build. It is much harder than the other builds, but Thor is really fun to play, so you've got to include him. If you want to see all of the builds that I cover today in an easy to read guide, then join my Discord using the link in the description and you can get this for free. It's perfect to have on your second monitor or to download onto your phone and just zoom in on whatever pantheon you're playing. I'll also be doing more in-depth videos for each god, so stay tuned for that.